Alright, so I am going to demo for you today how to make a coiled pot. First we need our slab mat and our scoring tool, this little rake looking thing. We need our metal rib as well as our wooden rib, which is the one that I prefer. I also have two bowls, one with just a little bit of clay scraps and the other one with some water. I also have my PVC rolling pin and my tile with some plastic on it. You could also use a grocery bag on top, but you have to have something or your piece is going to stick. And then here I have two big pieces of clay that I've already wedged. You probably won't need that much. And then I also have my plastic bag here because I need to keep the clay covered while I'm working so it doesn't dry out. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some slip. Slip is essentially clay with a lot of water in it, smushed together, and it makes like a glue for clay. So I just pour a tiny bit of water in, not very much at all, and start working my clay into it. Just really smushing it in there. You don't want to add too much water because then you'll have to add more clay. You don't need very much slip. Just keep squishing it. This is definitely something you want to do with your hands. Makes it a lot easier and faster. So just keep working that clay in to make your slip. You can see mine is starting to come together. Slowly but surely. Then I had to add a little bit more water, just a splash, and then that ended up being enough. I did not have to add any more water after this. Trying to work all of those little chunks out and make it nice and smooth. Alright, now it's time to start the base of my coiled pot. You can see I have my little bowl of slip over there, and I still have my bowl of water too because it's going to come in handy. I just like to pat my clay together into like a little pancake, just using my hands to start. This is just going to make rolling it out a lot easier. Also notice that on my slab mat I'm using the smooth side. Okay, now it's time to roll it out. Use two hands and you go in different directions to get that round base. I'm also going to flip it every once in a while. This stops the clay from sticking to my slab mat. Different directions, flip it again. And something to watch out for here is not rolling it too thin. I usually want my base maybe a little bit less than a ½ inch thick, and there's a great way to check that. You can use your needle tool, which is that metal sharp tool that's in your toolkit. Looks like this. And you can use that to measure. So put your finger down on it. And then you're going to poke through and then have your finger meet at the top. And then that's about how thick my base was. Just smooth out that little hole that I made. Alright. Now I have my base for my coiled pot. And it's a little bit too big, so I'm going to take my fettling knife from my toolkit and I'm going to cut out the shape that I want. But remember, we cannot cut on our slab mat, so I need to move that out of the way and put my base on my tile that has plastic wrap over it. Super crucial to have that plastic wrap, otherwise your piece is going to stick to the tile and it will tear. Now I've got my fettling knife. Not cutting on the slab mat, that's a no-no. And I'm just going to cut out the shape for my base. Mine's going to look a lot bigger than what I expect you all to do. So I'm just cutting along. Perfect. Take my excess clay off, squish it all together, and put that back in my plastic bag with my other clay, because this is good clay that I can still use. Okay, there's my base. Now I'm going to take my scoring tool and I am going to score all around my edges. And you go two different directions. Notice how I go back and forth. There's the little scratches I'm making all along the edges in different directions. Scoring is vital. It is going to help our coils stick to the base as well as our coils stick to one another. Pretty much whenever we put two pieces of clay together, we always want to score. Now this is where my slip comes into play. Scoring and slipping, they always come hand in hand. So now that I've scored all my little scratches, I can add slip once I am ready to put my coil on. Alright, so now I have my slab mat back out and I am going to roll my first coil. It's essentially like just making a big clay snake. So I have my clay. I'm going to take a good sized piece off of there. And I kind of like to shape it first with my hands, just like I did with the pancake, just to get it kind of started. So now I have that, and now I can start rolling it out with my hands. Notice that I'm holding down my slab mat too, so it doesn't scoot away from me. So I continue to roll out my coil side to side. Try to keep it even in width all the way up and down. And don't make it too thin either. See, mine's about maybe an inch or less than an inch thick, but you don't want it to be super thin either. All right, now I've got my coil. Now I can grab my base that's already scored. And I also need to score my coil. You always want to score both sides of the things that you're sticking together. So I just go back and forth, two different directions, and get it nice and roughed up. The scoring tool makes it nice and quick. There's my scoring on my coil. Okay, now I am going to add my coil that's all scored to the base. I need my slip, and I'm just going to take a little bit of slip on my finger and just pat some along where I scored. You don't want to add too much because you don't want it to turn into a sloppy mess, just enough to stick them together. All right, now it is ready to add my coil. And I'm just going to guide it along and kind of push it down with the scored side touching onto the other scored side on the base. Just like that. Now you'll notice I have this little bit of extra. You can either use your fettling knife to cut that off, or you can just pinch it off with your fingers, whatever you think is easier. And then I'm going to just meet those two ends, just like that. All right, so there's my first coil on the base. Now I can start smoothing them together with my fingers. You just want to be pushing and pinching them together. And see how I use my other hand on the inside while I'm smoothing the outside to support it. Otherwise, my coil could just slip off. See, just smoothing those lines together. And I'm also going to do it on the inside, not just the outside. We want to do both sides. And see how now I'm using my hand on the outside to support and smoothing that down in, just like that. And now I'm going to keep going all the way around on the inside and outside, always using my other hand to support it so that it doesn't squish away. And then I'm also going to blend those little ends together there too with my fingers. Get rid of that little seam. Now just continue to go around until it's smooth all the way around the coil and the base. Now I've continued to go all the way around on both the inside and outside of my coil, using my fingers to just smooth them together and make them into one piece of clay. You can also use your rib here if you would like. But I think it's easier with my fingers. Make sure you get all the way around. There we go. It's nice and smooth on the inside, as well as on the outside. Still needs a little bit of work, but... Okay, now I need to score again because I'm ready to add another coil. So I grabbed my scoring tool and I'm scoring across the top of that first coil. It's important to do this in between every single coil, otherwise they won't stick together like they should. So scored around those edges, as you can see, nice and textured up. And now I am going to grab my slab mat and roll more coils. All right, here's my second coil, and I'm scoring that one as well. Both directions, and there we go. My second scored coil. Now here is my base with the first coil. Almost forgot to add my slip there. Did you see that? Don't forget it. It is important. So I just pat a little bit, just right around that edge. And now I'm ready to add my second coil. Now guide it along, pushing it down gently, with the two scored sides touching one another. Now, if you were making something like a bowl and you wanted this to flare out, you may not be setting the coil right on top of each other. You would actually set it like slightly on the outside so it could start to flare out, or slightly on the inside if you're wanting it to come in. Now, I don't have to smooth in between every coil, so you see that I didn't do it on that second one. I'm going to just go ahead and roll out my third coil and add it on top, and then maybe smooth in between every 2 or 3 coils. I do like to get the first one on, though, smooth, so you have a nice strong base, But from there you can smooth in between every 2 or 3 coils with your fingers.